right, black and white sports reporters. Well, guess what? The Players Union actually sent a counter proposal to the WNBA. And the WNBA promptly rejected it into outer space. They Dikembe Mutombo that thing right back into the sun and said, we are not doing this revenue sharing thing. We keep telling you that.
The WNBA didn't just reject the players' latest proposal. They launched it into orbit, a defiant no, echoing throughout league offices. Adam Silver's administration moved quickly, labeling the entire package unrealistic and drawing a hard line against demands for gross revenue sharing that would, according to the league, severely damage profitability. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a decisive shutdown, escalating a standoff that now threatens the very start of the season. The players' core demands collided head-on with the stark realities of business, igniting an immediate and volatile crisis. The league's message was unmistakable: no deal under these terms, period. This rejection wasn't merely about financial figures. It struck at the foundational philosophy of how the WNBA operates, directly challenging a player-driven ideology that appears to overlook economic constraints. This dispute goes beyond dollars and cents. It's about control, long-term sustainability, and a profound ideological divide that risks unraveling everything. The WNBA's response was swift and uncompromising, leaving zero room for interpretation. They weren't just declining the offer. They were emphatically rejecting it, sending a crystal-clear signal to the Players Union that its central demands are non-starters. Such an outright dismissal points to a monumental crisis looming on the horizon.
Just write this off as an owner, so we don't care if you lose money. And it's like, okay, but you got to remember that's coming from somebody that their ideology, their personal political ideology is they hate capitalism. You got to remember that. And a lot of these players have that same ideology. So how do you talk business with somebody like that doesn't care? I mean, who doesn't want the business they work for to be fruitful and profitable and blah, blah? I mean, what are you doing there?
Behind this forceful rejection sits a profound philosophical divide, highlighted by star Natasha Cloud's widely discussed remark suggesting that owners can simply write it off if they lose money. That statement, controversial and attention-grabbing, points to a deeper ideological gap between certain players and league leadership. According to league insiders, some within the union approached negotiations from a perspective that places far less emphasis on traditional capitalist return models, making standard business bargaining extraordinarily difficult. How do you establish common ground on profitability when one side questions the priority of financial returns, while the other views sustainability as non-negotiable? That tension creates a widening rift, complicating meaningful compromise. The leadership of the WNBA now faces a uniquely complex challenge, negotiating with a segment of its workforce whose economic philosophy doesn't always align with conventional ownership models. This isn't merely a dispute over revenue percentages. It's a broader collision of worldviews that could reshape the league's future. Executives are grappling with how to secure long-term profitability, while the union pushes for structural changes it believes reflect player value and fairness. At its core, this ideological struggle fuels the current stalemate, driving both sides closer to a critical breaking point.
Included some concessions. I don't understand why all of this comes out late at night. They try to put this stuff out at night because they're trying to tamper down the blowback, and I'm not kidding you. All the news cycles are over with for the day, yada, yada, yada. That's exactly why they do this, so they won't get dragged as much throughout the day. I kid you not. Submitted a counter-proposal to the WNBA on Tuesday that included some concessions on revenue sharing and housing. Sources told
the Players Union, the Women's National Basketball Players Association, WNBPA, submitted its revised counter-proposal late Tuesday night. A calculated move many observers believe was designed to bury the story and reduce public backlash. The late-hour delivery, seemingly timed to slip past the daily news cycle, included concessions on revenue sharing and key housing concerns. Despite those apparent compromises, the league's response was swift and unequivocal, rendering the union's strategic timing ineffective. The midnight release did nothing to soften the impact of the proposal's contents. Instead, it underscored the significant divide that still separates the two sides. A tactic often used to temper public reaction appeared to backfire, drawing even greater scrutiny to the already tense negotiations. The league's rapid and public rejection, even after a low-profile submission, highlighted just how far apart both parties remain on core economic principles. In attempting to manage the narrative, the WNBPA ultimately fueled more questions about its strategy and negotiating posture.
That the teams continued to provide housing in the first several years of the new agreement, but that in later years, teams no longer be obligated to provide housing for players, making close to the maximum salary on multi-year deals and receiving full salary protection. That makes sense. Why should they keep paying for housing if they're making all this money? I mean, it's like, go out on your own and live your own life, and all we do is we pay your salaries. That's wild. It's wild. WNBA teams are required to provide housing.
The specifics of the union's demands are striking, particularly given the league's ongoing financial pressures. The Women's National Basketball Players Association, WNBPA, is now requesting an average of 27.5% of gross revenue, defined as revenue before expenses are deducted, across the life of the agreement. While that marks a slight reduction from their earlier 31% proposal, it remains, from the league's perspective, a non-starter. The union also proposed a 25% share in year one, paired with a salary cap just under $9.5 million. The central dispute revolves around gross versus net revenue sharing. This distinction is the core flashpoint in negotiations, prompting leadership within the WNBA and, by extension, the office of Adam Silver, to label the overall package unrealistic. League officials argue that agreeing to share revenue before accounting for operating expenses such as travel, marketing, arena costs, and administrative overhead could create unsustainable financial strain. From their viewpoint, such a structure risks long-term instability. For the union, however, gross revenue sharing represents a structural shift they believe better reflects player value. This single issue has become the deal's pressure point, exposing a sharp divide between player expectations and the league's economic framework, and threatening to derail the entire agreement.
Wow. WNBA fires back at Players Union over unrealistic counter proposal. I mean, if there had been ink involved in that statement, it wouldn't have been dry. And the WNBA swatted this joker to Adam Silver said, nah, we're not doing that because for some reason you don't know the difference between gross revenue and net revenue. WNBA released a fiery statement late Tuesday night calling the Players Union latest collective bargaining agreement proposal.
The league maintains that distributing revenue before deducting expenses would saddle teams with losses potentially reaching hundreds of millions of dollars, a scenario ownership flatly refuses to accept. Leadership within the WNBA is pushing to eliminate the gross component altogether, advocating instead for a framework that accounts for the real costs of operating a professional sports enterprise. This isn't a minor dispute over terminology. It's a core disagreement about financial structure that has stalled negotiations entirely. From the league's perspective, long-term survival depends on a sustainable economic model, and the union's insistence on gross revenue sharing represents a serious structural risk. At stake is not just the division of money, but the underlying accounting philosophy that governs the business itself, placing player ambitions in direct tension with profitability concerns. League officials have made it clear. This definition is a firm red line, and they are unwilling to cross it.
Prior to that, included some concessions on several hot-button topics. You can't call that revenue sharing. I mean, come on. They dropped it 2.5%. The league wants them to drop the gross part altogether because it's gross. But the WNBA said its modifications were not enough, and the proposal as it stands, quote, would cause hundreds of millions of dollars of losses for our teams. Well, according to Natasha Cloud, just write it off. Write it off. No big deal. They don't care if these owners ever make any money off this league. It's so wild to me. We still need to complete two.
Adding another layer to these already complicated talks were the players' proposals regarding housing. The Women's National Basketball Players Association suggested that teams continue covering housing costs during the early years of the new agreement. However, in later seasons, that obligation would be removed for players earning near maximum salaries on multi-year contracts with full salary protection. On the surface, the adjustment appears reasonable. If certain players are earning substantial salaries and have long-term financial security, why should teams remain responsible for their housing expenses? From a structural standpoint, it introduces a tiered approach tied to income level and contract stability. Despite that apparent compromise, the WNBA rejected the proposal in its entirety. The swift dismissal signaled that even these targeted concessions were insufficient to offset the league's primary concern, gross revenue sharing. In other words, adjustments on housing provisions could not outweigh what leadership views as a fundamental economic risk. The league's blanket rejection suggests a broader, systemic breakdown in trust over the union's overall financial framework. It wasn't simply one clause or a pair of provisions that caused hesitation. It was skepticism about the long-term viability of the entire model being proposed. Even partial compromises failed to bridge that divide.
How do you bargain with people that common sense is right out the door? And again, I don't think all these players believe that. I don't. But I think enough believe it. You've got enough Natasha Clouds in the mix to destroy the whole WNBA season. Because she thinks unrivaled's a thing. Okay. Because a Seattle owner can just write off the team because of real estate. Let me just keep this going. Yeah.
The WNBA's forceful counterstatement arrived almost instantaneously. One observer quipped, "If there had been ink involved, it wouldn't have been dry." Adam Silver's unequivocal rejection, conveyed via a league spokesperson, underscored the lightning-fast escalation of the dispute. The league stressed that the revisions in the union's latest proposal were far from sufficient, projecting that the plan would still produce staggering losses approaching $460 million. This isn't a minor disagreement over a few percentage points. It represents a monumental divide in financial projections. League leadership appears deeply frustrated by what they interpret as the union's refusal to confront economic realities. Their pushback has been decisive and unambiguous, leaving no room for interpretation. The speed and severity of this rejection highlight both the critical stakes of these negotiations and the WNBA's unwavering commitment to protecting its financial stability.
Of doing it, the problem is they're all part of a union, so they screwed themselves. That's the problem here. I don't think we're getting a season. That's the first time now I'll say that, and you know, they'll come to a deal at 10:50 p.m. one night in about 3 weeks. If a deal gets done, that's how it'll get done. Tell me what you think. Peace. I'm out. Till next time.
The clock is ticking, and tensions are skyrocketing as the 2026 season looms, just 80 days away. This incredibly tight timeline puts immense pressure on already fractured negotiations, as the league must still complete 2 drafts and navigate free agency before training camps can even begin. A league spokesperson stressed, "We are running out of time," underscoring both the urgency and the potential for severe disruption. The Women's National Basketball Players Association touted its proposal as a major victory for current players and future generations, arguing that a sustainable league ultimately benefits everyone. The contrast couldn't be starker. One side pushing for immediate, potentially unsustainable gains, the other emphasizing long-term health. This fundamental clash has created a deadlock with potentially catastrophic consequences. Every lost day pushes the league closer to an unprecedented crisis. Throughout these 16 months of negotiations, the WNBA has consistently stressed the importance of financial health and sustainability. This isn't mere rhetoric. It underpins their entire rejection of the union's demands. Sources familiar with the discussions have told ESPN that the league projects the players' latest plan would still result in an astounding $460 million in losses. This figure isn't arbitrary. It's the centerpiece of the league's argument against the current proposal. Leadership maintains that it cannot operate responsibly under such financial duress, making their stance on revenue sharing a matter of survival. The union's focus on immediate gross revenue shares directly conflicts with the league's commitment to long-term viability, creating an impasse that seems nearly impossible to overcome. Some players within the union allegedly suspect owners might be cooking the books, claiming the reported losses are exaggerated to justify lower player shares. Whether founded or not, these allegations erode trust, poison dialogue, and make compromise nearly impossible. Convincing someone to act in the league's best interest becomes an almost insurmountable challenge when they question the very numbers underlying negotiations. Adding to the complexity is a visible fracture within the union itself. While outspoken players like Natasha Cloud's season might be lost entirely, a consequence of the entrenched positions and ideological divide. The silence from Adam Silver's office following the rejection underscores the gravity of the situation. Even so, there remains a glimmer of hope. Historically, high-stakes sports negotiations often resolve in the final hours. Late-night breakthroughs after immense pressure force compromise. Both sides appear prepared to hold out until the absolute last moment, a game of brinkmanship with the future of women's professional basketball hanging in the balance. The WNBA CBA chaos is far from over. Silver's firm shutdown of player demands highlights a profound ideological battle over the league's financial structure. The clash between player expectations and economic realities has created an unprecedented standoff, threatening to unravel the season. As the clock winds down, the question is no longer just about percentages or housing. It's about whether a shared vision for a sustainable, profitable future can emerge from this deep chasm of mistrust. The league's future, and the very soul of the WNBA, hangs precariously, a stark reminder that in professional sports, business realities can overshadow passion. Compromise and mutual understanding are essential. Without them, even the most thrilling sport can face existential peril. This isn't just a negotiation, it's a battle for the WNBA's identity and survival.